Hello and welcome to Compelling Conversations where Law Meets Business. I'm Dara Rosenbaum from the law firm of Rosenbaum and Taylor. I'm one of the founding partners here. My own story as an entrepreneur has shown me the value, an incredible value of learning from others, whether it's from their mistakes, their failures, or what they would do differently the next time. So my goal in these shows is to bring you a business owner, business leader, or other inspiring person who can share with us their perspective, their experience, and their advice. And I know that you're going to learn so much from them, just as I'm sure I will. You can find this podcast anytime, any place you find your podcasts, and we look forward to hearing from you and staying with us. My guest today is Megan Anderson. And for over 20 years, Megan has been working alongside other entrepreneurs and small business owners. When 2020 hit and her consulting business was forced into closure, Megan took the opportunity to transform herself and her business into something new. Now, 2 years later, Megan runs a boutique podcast agency that helps other entrepreneurs achieve their dreams of having a podcast, but more importantly, a stage from which they can share their authentic stories with the world. So Megan, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to have a conversation with you today.
Oh, great. Me too. I'll tell you though, I'm a little intimidated. You run a podcast agency. I feel like there should be like a bell or something you have that you can ding if I do something wrong.
Oh, that's pretty funny because from my perspective, I'm always like, hey, the weird, the wonderful, the wild, I tell people, don't edit that stuff out. It's okay. There's nothing wrong.
We can do a postmortem offline. You can give me your thoughts. So what made you 2 years ago get into sort of the podcast world?
So really what it was as I'm sitting in 2020, I was running, like you said in my bio, I was running a consulting agency, helping people with operations, and I was enjoying it. I think the biggest blessing was 2020 when it sort of took all that away and went, what would you really like to do? And what I really found was at my heart, I love entrepreneurs and I love helping them be successful, find their own success, get their own, momentum. And so it kind of started out more as like an online accountability group, online co-working, and coupled with we'd work for an hour. And then at the end of the hour, I would bring on a topic expert and do just what we're doing here, have a live Q&A.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That business lasted for, started October 2020 and lasted for about a year. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of fizzled because we were all like, I'm done with this online stuff.
I think like the Zoom fatigue was setting in, right?
It was. And things were opening up and people could get back in person a little bit. They could go back to their coffee shops. And so they didn't really have a need to keep working in an online way or have that accountability piece. Mm-hmm. But I was sitting on content. And so one day I'm having a conversation with my partner and he was talking to me and asking, what is it that you like? Like, you've got all this stuff. And I realized what I loved was the conversation. Mm-hmm. I love the one-on-one conversation. I'm like you. I love to learn from other entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, oh my gosh, so I can still help them. There's like giving them the content and creating the things. And I'm so process driven that was where the agency side of it came from was, what I do and how I do it can really help other people create their own podcast in whatever, way that they're looking to have a podcast. And so we started diving into that. And because I was sitting on so much content, I had an entire season all ready to go. I just had to literally, it took me like a week or so and pop it in and then start promoting it. And then moving forward with season 2, which started February of this year. So it was just one of those things that it was sort of happenstance. But as I realized what I loved about it and where my actual gifts and talents lied, it just really meshed well together to start helping people instead of running their own businesses, doing a piece of it, which was get their face out there, speak from an authentic stage, because that's really what we do business with people we know, like, and trust. We talk about that a lot. And the video aspect seems to be a thing that people are really gun shy about. They're scared of it. And they feel like I'm going to look weird, or, you and I didn't grow up with a camera in front of our face like some of the younger generations.
No, just not at all.
it's that way to help people get out there and market and message and stay in their own space and just be them. And I think that was the biggest thing. And it was big for me too, to just go, oh, like now it's really hard for me to have a conversation without a camera in my face. I do person to person. I'm like, what's wrong?
Like,
Oh,
who's filming this?
can I hold my phone up?
You
While I
can get
talk?
that side.
So that's really how it kind of, morphed into being a podcast, was just taking what I love. And I think that's the best for anybody who's looking or trying to pivot in a business or anything. It's, what do you love about what you're doing now? And how can you get more of that in what you're doing as you're trying to figure out what you want to do in a pivot state?
And how do you get people past that camera shy thing? Because it feels to me like, it's like an acquired taste in food. Like somebody said, like, oh, it's an acquired taste. And my thought was like, well, I don't really need to work that hard to eat this thing. So, is it kind of like that, where it's like, well, if you have to kind of just push through the discomfort, or do you find people who are like, you know what, I'm not interested in being on camera. You can't tell me otherwise. And I don't even need a podcast. So
Yeah.
How do you tell somebody that this is something they should be doing?
And I think the proof really comes in the pudding. And here's the story that I tell people is this one. So it was probably just a couple of months ago. I think it was like March or April of this year. I hadn't been doing my own podcast for very long. But I had been doing it long enough that I had some episodes out there. And one day I was doing what I did, which was DMing people on LinkedIn, connecting, generating conversations and things. And all of a sudden somebody said to me, "Oh, I've seen your show." And I went, "Oh, okay. Which episode did you see?" And I was trying to talk about the guest, and they kept saying, "No, you're great. Like, I really enjoyed the way that you showed up." And it was just that one little piece. And so what I tell people, the thing that video, even if you're sticky in video, and the episode they were talking about, I was like, I look terrible. Like I was in a different, it's when I lived in my apartment, and, I like had this blank wall behind me, and I was fumbling around, and it was when I talk with my hands here, but I used to sit on my hands. And so it looked all weird and awkward, and they still felt that connection. And I think that's the piece, that it doesn't matter if you feel weird. And yes, you kind of have to push through that. And so the two things I say to people is, one, just even if you don't post it, record at least 1 minute a day. Just pick your phone up, put it in front of your face, and just record.
Right.
If you don't feel you can watch it, have somebody that you trust, a friend, a partner, a spouse, watch it. And not necessarily critique you, but just, either encourage you or say, "Oh, did you know that when you talk, you're never looking at the camera?" Or just something like that. That's one way. The second way, which is kind of a way that I actually work and help my clients, is sitting in conversation like this. When you're in a conversation, you don't even think about the camera. Like, I'm looking at you. Yes, I can see myself, and I will occasionally look at me, but I'm actually looking at you.
Yep. As well.
I think that's the ticket to getting past so when I do solo casts, I'll often have someone sit on the other side of my camera. And I don't do it anymore, but when you start, have someone there. Just be talking to someone, and that just really helps you loosen up and be like, "Oh, it's not talking to the void."
Right. It's much more natural.
There's a human being that's engaging with me. But I think that's how I personally pushed through I look weird and wonky on camera. And then just diving into, like I said, I talk with my hands, bring my hands up to my face so you can see your expressiveness, and just really being willing to dive into that is, I think, the biggest piece for people getting comfortable on video. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, honestly.
And how do people get past the idea of like, well, who really wants to hear about whatever it is I do, or who really wants to hear my opinion on these topics? Because there is that sort of self-indulgence sometimes on, in other platforms where it's like, this is what I had for breakfast, or I'm walking around and showing you my day. And so how do you get past that sort of feeling of, is anyone going to watch this? Or anyone going to listen to this?
Don't look at the numbers. I have learned that when I first started a podcast, I was like, ooh, I had 3 likes. Ooh, I had this. And like, I really got hung up on the numbers. And then I finally started realizing that many, many, many more people watch it than respond to it, reply it, like it.
Right.
I mean, you do it. We're in a feed and someone's video, random human's video that you thought was funny or that you enjoyed or was really intriguing to you, and you watched it, and maybe you watched it twice, but you never responded, replied, or did anything.
Right.
You just have to understand that it is actually getting in there, and it's consistency. And knowing that, hey, if I post a video twice a week, I may never know. And I think that that's where we get hung up. What you said about like that viral piece, that Instagram, I'm supposed to have the likes and the things and the, if it's a message you're passionate about, there's people who are ready to hear it. I feel like, I go and I wax philosophical about podcasting. Who wants to hear about it? Somebody.
Somebody does. That's right.
Somebody does.
I did. That's why you're here.
It's exactly. Somebody wanted to hear about what it's like podcast. And so I think that's the biggest piece. If something that I absolutely love is take a sticky note, put it, next to your camera. You can see it. It's not really, it's on your screen.
Right.
It's just I think mine for a long time, I don't have it anymore, but mine for a long time was just keep going or just keep talking or you're doing great or whatever it is that you can actually see. That's just that reminder that it's okay.
Yeah.
That there are, and that's what I think the biggest thing is, ignore the numbers and know that the people who need to hear your message or who want to hear your tips or tricks or advice, they're going to hear it. They're going to see it. It's going to come across.
And it's interesting because people have asked me like, oh, well, how many followers do you have? Or how many views are you getting? I'm like, listen, I'm not, I'm not a public figure. I don't need millions. I'm not expecting to have millions of people listening to the interviews that I do or listening or watching the content that I put out there or reading what I do. I work with small businesses. That's obviously there's a ton of those, there's a ton of those potential listeners and people who want to learn. But, I don't need an audience of millions around the world to reach the people who I want to share things with.
No, and that's a huge point. It is, are you attempting to make a viral video? Well, first off, you better be ready for that because you have no idea I've had friends who've accidentally done it and it's not actually very pretty. If your goal is not to go viral, don't try. If you do it by accident with a cute puppy video, okay. But your goal should be to attract how many clients can you really work with if you're doing this for business purposes? I can't work with 1 million clients. I wouldn't even try.
Right.
Like, holy, no. 10, I have 10, 20, whatever that goal is, and just be like, hey, if I'm reaching 100 people and one of those people becomes my clients or one of those people is inspired, great. It's impact and quality over quantity and numbers, especially in the business world, especially if that's your purpose for podcasting. And I would say for podcasting, that should be your purpose.
Yeah.
The things that go viral are the TikToks and the shorts and the little teeny tiny clips because it's that voyeuristic lifestyle. Like, ooh, we got this snapshot of something funny or poignant or happy, but it's a tiny, tiny moment. Where podcasts are longer and longer over time. And I was looking at my numbers just yesterday and I'm like, that video is still getting watched. It was posted 9 months ago. 2 watches in the past month, but
2 watches. I get it. Yeah.
Watches. You never know. And I think that when you have that goal of just continuing to put that out there, that's far more important than, and you become much more of an influencer and an expert in your field in people's eyes if you just keep that consistency and keep going rather than attempt to get 100 views or 1,000 views or 1 million views or whatever that is.
Right. And I think that, I've told people this. I said, I'm not doing my podcast necessarily for business development or client cultivation or growing the firm. It's coming back to me in other ways. I'm getting people who are saying like, hey, somebody recommended you and I decided to check you out. And I was able to watch a couple of minutes of this podcast or read this article. And, I kind of feel like I know you already. Which is, to me, sort of gets that conversation from a pretty cold referral to, or even a warm referral to, I kind of feel like I know you and let's talk some more. I think there's a lot of research that goes on sometimes before that initial phone call,
Yep.
and having things like video out there, I think really is
huge, because 98% of all communication is nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
So if all you're doing is putting out written articles, people are reading them in their head in the mood that they're in. I'm in a negative mood. Your article sounded really awful to me. I don't like you.
Right.
But there's no denying a smile, if something funny happening, life happening. My dogs have hopped into videos and barked. I tell this story all the time. There was one time I knocked my glasses clean off my face because I was getting so excited about what I was saying. And I didn't edit it out. And it just happened. It was a moment in a podcast, and I picked him up, put him back, and kept going. But that's that type of thing. Like you said, somebody now feels like they know you. Like they're sitting across from me. This is my dining room table where I record from, but they're just sitting here at my table having a conversation. And there is no warmer referral than when someone's like, I saw you talking about, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
I think for a lot of the business owners that I work with and business leaders I work with, marketing is either an afterthought. Sometimes it's front of mind for a couple of weeks, or it's it's an immediate need where they feel like they need to get a new product out there, a new service, or they feel like they're, need to communicate something about what they're doing differently. How does the podcast kind of fit in, or does it fit into that kind of, short-term, mid-range, long-term marketing plan that I would hope most of my businesses have?
Most of them. So podcasting in general is the long game. One, never expect to make money from your podcast. Just don't. Even if your goal is to get a sponsor and monetize, just have zero expectation that direct money from the podcast. That's not its purpose. But what it does is, like I said, over that long haul, people watch things. They'll go because they came to this video or they were listening to this one thing, and then they're like, oh, there's another one here and there's more. So that's the long-term commitment, is you have a library of content that is totally you. Even like you and I have guests, there's so much of you in a hosted podcast.
Yeah, I think so.
Even with guests. So that long game is it's consistency, and we know consistency in marketing is huge. And like you said, okay, so I've got a webinar that I'm doing in 2 months, and I really would love to promote that through the podcast. Great. Do your long content, your 15, 20, 30, 45-minute content in there, even again, if it's hosted. And somewhere in there, you can, hey, I've got this upcoming thing. It might be at the end. Edit it out and create shorts from it. That's the beautiful thing about podcasts. What it gives you is when you talk for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, either in conversation or solo casting, at some point in there, you're going to create a little tiny snippet. 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. There's going to be something in there that you could actually edit out fairly easily to use in all that short-term stuff. So, or your webinar happens to be about starting a business, in your case, that so you're talking about starting a business, and then there's this 60 seconds that's just great. That becomes a TikTok, that becomes a reel, that becomes the next 4 weeks of social media stuff, and you're just reusing your content that you created in 30 minutes. It saves you so much time, and that's where that short-term, mid-term comes from, the long, consistency of podcasts. Go back and reuse stuff. I do it all the time. On my YouTube channel, I have all the long-term podcast stuff, but then I'll pull out my little pieces and just have this library of little snippets of me saying something. And then it's like, oh, this week I'm talking about that. Oh, look, I've got a little snippet that says something about that. Now I can just use it. And that's how it plays into the.
I hear them now. I hear the listeners and the viewers going, that sounds like a lot of work. It's a long game, and that sounds like a lot of work. So, how do you kind of get them over that? Because I can
get over the long work.
Hear that, like, hey, Dara, I heard you interview with Megan, and like, yeah, sounds cool, but I don't know social media. I don't have a social media manager, and this is not my full-time job. So how do you kind of get past those thoughts?
So, sorry, folks, bursting a bubble here. Anything in business is work.
That's definitely.
Like I say, the way to get consistent is to be consistent. There is nothing past the work. However, The ways that you can help yourself. First off, if all you have is this, great, work with the phone. You do not, if you're like all the, yes, do I have a ring light over here? Yes. Do I have a professional podcast mic? Yes. None of that is how I started. I had a MacBook with a camera, which I'm still using right now, and a microphone. And that's how I started. What you have is where you can start. It actually works better and more in your favor if it's less professional. So when I talk about editing, there's lots of there are tons of softwares out there that are free. I personally, because I have a MacBook, I use iMovie. iMovie was made for children to create movies from photos. It is absolutely any editor out there.
That should be pretty user friendly.
Oh my gosh. And professional video editors who just heard me are going, oh, what? Guys, it doesn't have to be a learning curve. Like literally, if you can drag and click, you can edit a video. There's, streaming softwares like what we're using here have editors in them. YouTube has an editor. You can record straight into YouTube and edit it down.
Right.
It doesn't have, so yes, everything takes work, but work is just time. When we think about it, it doesn't have to be hard. That's a mental. The word hard or difficult, that's a mental thing. And the other thing that, and that's when I work with my consulting clients is, hey, let me just tell you, here's the process you're going to take to do it. What software are you using? And I tell people this all the time. Every single software has a knowledge base. Google it.
Yeah.
Somebody out there's made a YouTube video on how to do it, and you can learn it in short order. So if you're in that, I want to do it by myself stage, don't overthink. Use what you've got and recognize that having the video and putting it out there is more important than it being right or proper or, perfect. That idea of perfection is actually keeping you from doing the thing that is going to just be out there.
Definitely.
And that's okay. And so there is a lot of mental game in getting past the video piece and the editing piece. And yes, there's humans like me that help and can do that stuff for you. But again, there's so much stuff that if you just take a few minutes and Google it, you can actually get a lot of answers for, hey, I've got this computer, I've got this software. I don't want to learn all of it. I needed to do this one little thing. So learn the one little thing. Don't learn the whole software. Learn the thing that you need it to do.
Right. And you don't have to go in and do a 45-minute video and then chop it into smaller pieces and post it on TikTok and make a reel. You can do all or none of that. And then as you learn each piece of the software, in my experience, you start doing a little bit more and a little bit more as you get comfortable with it.
And that's a really good piece of advice. If all you're comfortable with is picking up your phone and recording for a minute, do it. That's a step. That's a start. Instagram's got, easy ways. If you can attach anything to an email, you can upload a video. It really is fairly simple. I always go back to my now 13-year-old could have probably done all of this when he was 5, 6, 7, because the softwares out there are designed for ease of use. You don't have to be professional to look really professional. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Right.
And I also tell people, here's the other tip. I happen to be wearing a sundress today because it's 100 degrees here. And I'm like, yay, I got to wear my sundresses. But you don't have to put anything else on. Sometimes I don't wear makeup. Great. People are seeing the behind the scenes. Sometimes I do it from outside. Sometimes it doesn't have to be any studio or professional or anything. And I think that's a misnomer that we have in our heads, is that a podcast is this hugely professional. Some of my favorite podcasts to listen to are just two people having a conversation about weird stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's just an entertainment piece or an education piece. And so, yeah. And I think that that's really it is let go of the notion of other, and it's judging ourselves. I find other people care far less about the little nuances than me judging my own stuff.
Right. And it goes back to that story you told where someone said, I like what you're doing. I really liked you. And you're like, but my hair was kind of a mess that day. And I think I stumbled over a couple of words. Like that wasn't what anybody remembered.
Nope. Nope, not at all. They don't remember the little nuances. They remember the whole thing. We have so much information coming at us that really what they remember, it's the same thing as when you go to a networking group. The first time you know nobody. The second time that face looks familiar. Don't remember your name, but I know I met you last time. So you go and talk to them again. The third time, 5 people in the room, you're shaking hands, we're buddies. It's the same thing. This face becomes familiar. I know you're the podcasting human. Great. That's all they need to really remember. Oh, that's right. You're the person who comes on my feed and talks about this thing. That's it. That's the most important piece of podcast. And I think the other thing that I didn't say this in the beginning, but defining what a podcast actually is, because we all have this idea that it's this audio thing. Podcasting now is everything from audio only, which is how they started, audio and video for long periods of time. Live. I do a live podcast once a week. If you're going live, you're creating a podcast. It is a library of some type of content over time. Yeah. That's it. It's not this, everyone's like, oh, it's got these pieces, and there are ways to make it better and more consistent and all of that. But just getting started, like doing the thing. And then, again, if you need help or things, getting advice and talking to people and, watching other podcasts, listening, I did that too. Take tips from what other people have done. Right. You don't have to reinvent a wheel that's been around for a long time.
And also, I think one thing you mentioned is it doesn't have to be professional. It doesn't have to be like this. So when you're looking at equipment, you're not building a TV studio, a radio station, a radio studio in your house. I have my little Larry King mic. It wasn't expensive. The lights behind, nothing here is expensive. The camera's not expensive. It's, I'm not building a setup in a soundproof room. I'm in my office. So I think that's something that people can know. Listen, if eventually you want to upgrade the camera or upgrade the mic, do it later. But I wouldn't use that as an excuse not to do it, because it's not an expensive outlay. It's just start. And if you want to just use your phone, use your phone. Get your phone on you anyway.
Yep. You have a camera. We have a video camera on us at all times. Like it really isn't, and I do tell people, I'll say, if you want to use your phone, spend a little bit, and it $20 maybe, get a ring light that has a phone holder. It's got a stand, a ring light, and a phone holder. That's it. That's all you need to actually get started. Nothing professional, anything like that. And yeah, like you said, over time, as you get into, I like the sound of, because I'll be talking to people and they're like, oh, I like that professional sound. Well, I use this mic. Right. Oh, great. I use a more expensive mic because this is a funny story. I moved in with my partner last October, and I'd been recording podcasts maybe 2 months ago. I'm downstairs, putting something away, and I found a mic. I'm like, you have a professional mic and you didn't tell me. He's like, oh, I forgot about it. And I'm like, so sometimes you may have something and you don't know, or
you never know.
You never know. And things, work. But yeah, you don't have to have any of that to get started.
Right.
Really, there's some podcasts I love that are short. They're like 2 minutes and they're always recorded on phones. Doesn't matter.
Yep. Doesn't matter to you, right?
No. Yeah. No, because I like the content. I like, what they're talking about, and the person, more than I care about the professional look of it. So
now, I think the answer to this question probably is somewhere in a lot of our discussion already, but why do you think so many podcasts fail? Why do you think so many people have like that, 1 or 2 episodes or a season or not even a season, and then they're gone?
Yeah. A statistic I heard a little while back was 97% of all podcasts never get past 10 episodes. The average podcast posts twice a month, which means 5 months of work gone. So I think the biggest reason is because people have a misconception in their head. First off, I did say this earlier, it's the long game. Right. If you're going to commit to a podcast, commit for 18 months to 2 years. I think the other thing is it's a lot like, toddlers who get really excited about something and, oh my gosh, and we're going. And then we crash and burn and just like fall down and take a nap. the same
I have a 3-year-old. I'm very familiar with that.
Yes. Like, how are you going so hard? And then just boom, done.
Yeah.
I think it's the same concept. Like anything great, baby step into it.
Mhm.
I actually almost did this to myself. I was doing a daily podcast because I was like, I want to get, let's just do this. Let's do. And then I started burning out and I was like, I don't want to podcast anymore. And I thought, okay, that's not true, but how can what's good? What feels comfortable? If once a month feels comfortable to start, get started for once a month. Do that for 3 months and then try twice a month.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that burnout comes when people are, one, they have misaligned expectations. Again, they're going to make money from the podcast. Probably not. They're going to get a ton of business from the podcast. Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're creating it and then they're not doing anything with it.
Mm.
It is not a build it and they will come. It is a build it and then you get to market the heck out of your marketing. It is not a field of dreams. It is nothing like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing is, people put it up on YouTube and they're like, oh, people can find me on YouTube. No, they can't. Not unless you're utilizing YouTube's SEO strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a huge learning curve. Hey, I actually had to hire someone to do it and teach me because I'm like, I don't want to learn. Just teach me. Like, walk me through it because I don't want to take the Google time to do it. Mm-hmm. So that, unless you understand all of those things, I think that's where people and why they fail so quickly is they just don't have the right goal in mind. Set yourself a 2-year goal. Mm-hmm. And let the goal just be getting the message out there, getting consistent, giving myself something to market regularly. Because I'll tell you, when you tell people you do a podcast or have a podcast, you've experienced this. What's your podcast about? Right. How do I find you? Okay, can I listen? Mm-hmm. It is the easiest thing in the world to market.
Yep, it is. I think it is.
Website and not YouTube. Have a website. Drive all your traffic to your website that promotes your podcast. The front page is your podcast, and then everything else you do can be in there. Mm-hmm. But driving traffic to a website like that as a marketing, that's it. Like it can be it can be a single landing page, folks. Don't get all fancy. Don't go hire someone for $5,000 to do a website. You don't need that. Mm-hmm. You can do them very short order. Right. Just someplace to go on social media and say, hey, new episode up about X, Y, and Z. Here's the link.
Great.
But when you tell people you have a podcast, they get excited because you're actively doing something that people think is hard, think is pretty cool, and really want to support you because they don't have to pay anything to do it. They can just learn from you, hear you, see you, that kind of thing.
Yep. So I read something that you're involved with something called Geeking Out about video, which kind of feels like a little bit of what you've been doing for the last time,
yes.
Hour or so we've been talking, which I love. But
yes.
What is geeking out about video?
So, like I shared earlier, once a week I do a live podcast. So, as part of my podcast is Flow Working, the Entrepreneur's Podcast. My live episodes I stream through LinkedIn, and I do LinkedIn and Facebook now. Mm-hmm. And once a month, as part of that, I have a guest named Ed Troxel. He's one of my favorite human beings. He's a video coach. Oh, okay. So he's the human being that if you actually struggle getting comfortable on video, he actually helps people do that. He coaches people through the awkward, weird stage. But what's fun for us is he comes at it from the TikTok, the reel, the social media. He's got that background, the short term. Mm-hmm. And I come at it from the long term. And we talk about video. We talk about all things. We talk about the technology, we talk about software, we talk about how do I decide what to talk about? Or, a lot of the things we talked about today, he and I will just chat about it live once a month. It's usually the second Wednesday of every month. Mm-hmm. We go live and we just chit chat about videos, experiences we've had, things that we've seen that we love. He'll talk about viral trends, things that you may want to try. And no, none of it is TikTok dancing. We talk about educating because he works a lot with small businesses and realtors in specific in his world. And so we talk back and forth about the same topic, and we say that we're geeks because both of us are big giant nerds and we kind of think it's funny. And so we talk back and forth about video, but both of us come at it, like I said, I come at it from that long-term, long content. He comes at it from the short-term, social media side. And so we just chit chat on everything video once a month, which is a lot of fun for us.
I saw you said TikTok dancing, and now I blame you because I picture so many of my clients now doing some sort of TikTok dance, and that's
no. And I always do my bad little Vogue thing because I was the Madonna girl, and I'm like, no, unless you happen to be like catching me voyeuristically with the camera and I'm not paying attention, dancing in front of the camera is not happening for this girl.
I think that goes back to one of the things, like there's certain times you don't want to be viral.
Yeah, exactly. There's certain things that you just don't want to go viral for, and bad dancing, not one of them. But that's
one of them.
And I think that's the thing, is that there's a lot of trends. Last month we were talking about the trend where you're just, and then you edit the words over and put some music on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, because those are really great for business people. Mm-hmm. I've made them. Mm-hmm. They actually take more work than a podcast.
Oh, okay.
For me. But then Ed was like, oh, no, they're really simple. Here's how you do them. And so just us having conversations about that kind of thing, I'll be like, all right, I want to make this video, but it took me an hour to make a 30-second video. What the heck?
Right.
And he and I talk about those kind of trends and things. But no. I told him the other day, I said, I want you to get up and shake your booty and show me a viral dance. He's like, no, I don't do that either. You can be trending without having to do all of the challenges and the trends and the, those types of things. That they're fun and you can do them if you want, but it's not required for you to do that in order to create videos that people are going to watch.
But I think all that goes back to the learning you were talking about, that you just ask people questions, learn from them, ask them, like, hey, listen, I like the thing that you did. How do we do that? What do you use to do that? What's your software? What's your process? Because you're going to learn a lot from everybody else, and it's going to short circuit the YouTube watching and the YouTube tutorial watching and the Googling and all those kind of things that somebody can just show you.
Yep. And you will be absolutely surprised how often, and I do it with people all the time. If you're gonna ask me a question that takes me 5 minutes or less to answer, hey, let's just hop into a chat real quick and I'll answer the question for you. Most people are more than happy to do it, or give you that here's the 5 steps, go do that. Not sure how, then we could talk about consultation, but honestly, it's most of the information you need is just asking.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So speaking of learning, I love to ask everybody the same question. What is something that you've learned along the way that you wish you'd known earlier?
Gosh, that I wish that I had known earlier. I think it goes back to something I said sort of towards the beginning. You never know who's watching, so just keep going. Because sometimes it's not the thing that you think they're going to learn. It's whatever they needed to hear.
Right.
Because sometimes I'll be in the middle of a live video and I'll say something personal. And it wasn't that was what the video was about. It was just here's a personal aha that I had this week, and I just was going to share it as part of this. And that's the thing. Mm-hmm. And I've had people go, you made my day with that comment. I was like,
that's wonderful. That's great.
I'm talking about making video, and I said something personal. But I think that was what I wished that I'd known from the beginning. And I think I would have had much more enthusiasm about continuing, and I do continue it, but I think I would have, started the podcast sooner, and I would have, done more with promoting things, because there was a whole period of time where I made all these podcasts and I didn't do anything with them. And I think but just knowing that you never know who you're going to impact. And if impact, like for me, impacting others is a huge piece, helping others. And just knowing that would have really, I think, changed my mindset about it, which really would have changed a lot of the ways that I ended up doing some things.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Like, I think this has been fantastic. It's so rich in
Yeah.
information and in inspiration. I think that there are probably people listening and watching who are saying, like, you know what, I kind of thought about it. It seemed like a cool thing to do, but I didn't know how to start. And I think you've given them a lot of information, either how to start, how to continue, and why,
Yeah,
why it's important to do that. So thank you so much
absolutely.
for sharing all that.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation
I
today.
have too. How do people find you?
So the easiest way is LinkedIn. Find me, and it's actually Megan Danae Anderson, which is Megan, M-E-G-A-N, Danae, D-E-N-A-E, Anderson. Find me on LinkedIn, DM me. I'm always on. It's the fastest way to just connect with me. You got questions, I'm always happy to answer questions, start a conversation. Even if people are like, I have an idea, does this make a good podcast? Let's chat. I love chats. So
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
Well, that's very generous. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and see if I get see if I get an email later saying, like, here are all the things you could have done differently.
Not at all. Cynthia, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's always
Thank
fun being in
you.
the seat versus the host seat. So
Thank you so much.
yeah.